Under the buzzing neon sign of a roadside diner in rural Minnesota, a man sat completely still, as if bracing for a blow no one else could see. The shocking part was the empty chair across from him, set with a full set of silverware, as though someone invisible were expected to arrive. That single untouched place setting had shattered more than one curious onlooker's assumptions, but Adam Carter didn't care. He kept his rituals close guarded, like a secret he refused to surrender. Tonight was supposed to be another quiet evening, another attempt to outrun the ache that never softened no matter how many bowls of soup he ordered or how many nights he sat beneath the same flickering lights. Outside wind battered the glass like impatient fists. The world beyond the window blurred into sheets of rain that erased the road, the parked cars, and every trace of movement. Inside, the diner hummed with the low murmur of distant conversations, the clatter of plates, the rhythmic hiss of the kitchen grill. Adam, 41 and carved from equal parts exhaustion and stubborn resolve, wrapped both hands around his bowl, letting the rising steam warm his face. He didn't need to glance at the seat across from him. He knew its emptiness by heart. 3 years since Emily's passing, and still the chair felt colder than the harshest Minnesota winter. Even now, he sometimes caught himself reaching for stories to tell her, only to stop. Midway through the thought, like a man stepping onto a missing stair. His daughter Mia, 10 years old and growing braver by the day, was staying with her grandparents for the week. She thought the trip was for fun, a temporary change of scenery. She didn't know her father needed space to breathe space that felt more like drowning than resting. He loved her fiercely, but grief had a way of stealing the oxygen from every room he entered. Tonight he hoped the predictable comfort of routine would settle him. Same table, same dinner, same attempt at pretending life was something he could repair with his hands the way he repaired broken engines at the garage. But beneath the surface, something restless stirred. A strange tension prickled along the back of his neck, the uncanny awareness that the night was about to shift. Usually Adam ignored intuition. It reminded him too much of a version of himself he preferred people to underestimate. The quiet mechanic, the widowed father, the man who kept to himself. No one knew anything more about him, and he intended to keep it that way. He took a slow breath, letting the scent of freshly baked bread and burnt coffee settle into him, letting the murmur of late-night patrons fade into a distant hum. Memories pressed at the edges of his thoughts, Emily's laughter, the soft glow of their first apartment, and the crack in her voice the day she whispered she didn't have much time left. He blinked hard and forced the memories back down, swallowing against the familiar tightness. He could manage the grief as long as it stayed quiet. It was when it roared that he found himself hollowed out. The diner door creaked with a sudden violent gust of wind, the kind that slammed into the room like a warning. Adam stiffened instinctively. Rain exploded across the floor in a cold spray, and 2 silhouettes appeared in the doorway, small soaked through trembling. A woman's voice cut through the startled hush, thin and uncertain, yet edged with desperation. And though Adam didn't yet know it, the moment she opened her mouth would tear apart the worn rhythm he clung to and drag him into a story he thought he had no right to live again. He didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. Something deep and unspoken shifted in the air, the kind of shift that made the past crack open and the future tilt. For years, Adam Carter had been dismissed as the quiet widower, with grease-stained hands and a heart too heavy to carry anything new. No one suspected the truth that lived beneath his silence. He wasn't just a man surviving loss. He was a man built to rise from it. And on this storm, thrashed night before he even touched his spoon again. Adam understood with a certainty that startled him his life was about to be interrupted. Interrupted violently, profoundly, and perhaps mercifully. Because sometimes the story you fear the most is the one that finally brings you back to yourself. The doors slammed hard enough to rattle the windows, and every conversation in the diner died mid-sentence. Wind spiraled in behind the two figures standing at the entrance, sweeping rain across the floor in a cold, shimmering sheet. Adam finally looked up, and the sight hit him with the force of a memory he didn't recognize yet. A woman, maybe 30, her hair plastered to her cheeks, stood with one arm wrapped protectively around a thin little boy, who shivered so hard his teeth clicked. She hesitated, as if terrified she would be sent back into the storm, then stepped forward with a voice trembling at the edges. "My son is hungry," she whispered. "Could we just stay for a while?" Her apology lingered in the air, fragile enough to break under the wrong breath. Adam felt something shift in him, the way a frozen lake groans before the thaw. The waitress, startled by the sudden scene, looked to Adam as though waiting for anyone to decide whether these strangers belonged. Adam pushed his chair back, ignoring the sting in his chest that always accompanied unexpected moments of need. "Sit," he said quietly, pulling out the chair across from him, the chair he had set for Emily. "No one should eat alone tonight." The woman blinked, startled by the kindness, or perhaps by the invitation, into a space clearly meant for someone else. She guided the boy toward the seat, her hand shaking slightly, as she brushed wet hair off his forehead. Up close, Adam could see how bad it really was. The boy's jacket was too thin for the late autumn cold, his shoes worn at the toes, his small fingers stiff from freezing rain. The woman Rachel, she would later tell him, was drenched through her clothes, clinging to her like surrender flags. Her eyes held exhaustion layered over something deeper, something carved by fear rather than weather. "We won't bother you long," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the tabletop, as if afraid to look him in the eye. "We just needed to warm up." But the boy Evan lifted his head enough to whisper a soft, "Thank you," his voice barely more than a breath. Adam signaled the waitress. "2 bowls of soup," he said, "and a grilled cheese and hot chocolate." "Sir, we can't," Rachel began. "We can," Adam corrected gently. The tension in her face cracked into something fragile, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Evan's eyes widened, glowing with a sudden warmth that broke through the cold, clinging to him. When the food arrived, the boy ate with the hunger of someone who had learned to ration hope. Rachel tried to eat slowly, maintaining the last shreds of dignity she carried, but Adam saw the tremor in her hands, the way her ribs shifted beneath her damp shirt. "When did you last eat?" he asked. She hesitated, then surrendered to honesty. "Yesterday morning. A gas station muffin." Adam felt his throat tighten. He studied them more carefully now. Their story wasn't written in words. It was written in battered seams, thin jackets, hollow cheeks. Written in the way Rachel's shoulders hunched protectively, ready to shield Evan from the world with nothing but her own fear-worn body. Something fierce rose in him, an old instinct he rarely listened to anymore. "Where are you staying tonight?" Adam asked. Rachel lowered her gaze. "We'll figure it out. Maybe a shelter if they have space." Adam knew they wouldn't. Not this late. Not in weather like this. And even if they did, those places were often crowded, unsafe, full of shadows that preyed on exhaustion. He didn't say any of it, but he didn't need to. The truth hung between them like a silent alarm. Then the boy laughed at something the waitress said, and for the first time in 3 years, the sound of a child's joy echoed through the diner again. Adam felt it slice through him, both painful and healing, like light, finding the cracks in a boarded-up room. Rachel noticed the untouched silverware, the empty chair Adam kept glancing toward. "Were you waiting for someone?" she asked softly. Adam nodded. I was. Her eyes softened with understanding before she whispered, "I'm sorry." And strangely, her sorrow didn't sting the way it usually did. Evan leaned close to his mother, then looked at Adam with a wisdom children shouldn't have. "Maybe she's watching us eat together," he said. "My grandma's in heaven too. Mom says she still sees us." The words hit something deep inside Adam, shifting the ground beneath him. He looked at the boy, then at Rachel, and something in his chest gave way, something that had been clamped shut for too long. "You're a smart kid," Adam murmured. Rachel smiled for the first time, small but real. Too smart sometimes. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, something unexpected settled at Adam's table, not comfort, not peace, but possibility. A quiet stirring that hinted this night was no accident that these two strangers might be the first warmth to enter his life, since loss had swallowed it whole. And though he didn't know it yet, the moment he pulled out that chair, though Emily's chair, his entire future had already begun to shift. Fear didn't leave Rachel's eyes, even after the warmth of the soup returned a little color to her face. She held herself like someone expecting the world to collapse again at any moment, shoulders drawn tight, fingers curled protectively near Evan's bowl, as though shielding him from invisible threats. Adam watched her avoid his gaze, watched her fight the trembling in her hands, watched the exhaustion etched into every small movement. Something in him recognized that kind of fear, intimately the fear of someone who had lost too much too fast and was still bracing for the next blow. It didn't take long for their guarded silence to unravel. Trauma had its own gravity, pulling truth from people who had run out of strength to hide it. When Adam asked gently where they had come from, Rachel hesitated, then exhaled shakily, as if releasing a confession she had carried too long. She told him she had fled Illinois 2 weeks earlier, with nothing but a backpack, $26, and Evan's hand clutched tightly in hers. Her husband's rage had escalated beyond shouting, beyond breaking dishes. She had woken one night to Evan, crying quietly in the dark, pressing a tiny hand to a bruise she hadn't known he'd seen. That was the moment she left. Her voice cracked when she admitted she had no real plan, except escape. Hotels were impossible. Shelters overflowed. She had slept in the car on 3 separate nights, sitting upright, while Evan curled against her side. She tried to laugh it off, but the brittle edge in her tone revealed the truth. She had been terrified every hour since leaving, terrified of being found, terrified of being judged, terrified that she couldn't keep her son alive another day. Adam absorbed every word with a heaviness that wrapped around his ribs. Something unspoken stirred again, an echo of the man he used to be, before grief hollowed him out. He felt protective, fiercely so, though he had no right to feel anything more than sympathy. But Evan, small and brave despite everything, looked up at him with the kind of trust children give only to those who've earned it in an instant. "Mom says we're starting over," he whispered. "Do you think we can?" The innocence in his voice struck Adam deeper than any blow. Rachel tried to steady herself, pretending strength she didn't have. She apologized for oversharing, apologized for burdening him, apologized for simply existing. Adam stopped her. "You don't have to explain survival," he said quietly. "Not to me." She blinked, startled by the certainty in his voice, unaware of the losses he carried behind his calm exterior. To her, he was just a mechanic offering kindness. She didn't know the depth of what grief had carved out of him, didn't know how long it had been since he'd felt anything but numb resignation. Then the conversation shifted, unexpectedly gentle. Evan talked about school, though he hadn't attended in days. He talked about superheroes, though he didn't think he was brave enough to be one. Rachel admitted she had once wanted to study nursing before life closed in around her. And Adam shared pieces of Emily's small, soft memories, almost accidental slips, how she used to burn every pancake she made, how she insisted grief never owned a person unless they let it. But beneath the soft moments, tension coiled. The storm outside grew fiercer, beating against the windows like fate knocking. Adam sensed that this night was building toward a decision. He didn't know what it would demand of him. Yet only that something about Rachel's trembling voice and Evan's fragile hope made the diner suddenly feel too small for the weight gathering inside him. And when the wind howled again, rattling the glass, Adam realized he no longer felt alone in the world. He felt responsible. Adam didn't realize he'd made the decision until the words were already leaving his mouth. "You can't sleep in that car tonight." The sentence hung between them, startling Rachel into stillness. She blinked rapidly, as if the offer were dangerous to believe, as if hope itself might burn her. "We'll be fine," she insisted quietly, fingers tightening around Evan's sleeve. "We have blankets. We've managed before." But even as she spoke, her voice wavered, betraying the truth she was too proud to admit. She had run out of strength. She had run out of options. The storm outside battered the windows, with brutal force thunder rolling over the diner like a warning from the dark. Adam looked at the woman across from him, drenched, exhausted, fighting a losing battle, and felt an old instinct rise through him, sharp and absolute. He had spent years shutting down that instinct, burying it beneath grief and routine. But now it surged forward like something awakening. "No one manages in weather like this," he said. "And you shouldn't have to." His tone was calm, but conviction simmered beneath it. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but then Evan's small body shook with a deep shiver she couldn't hide. She wrapped her arm around him again, helplessly rubbing warmth into his soaked jacket. Adam's resolve hardened. "I've got a place," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's warm. You and Evan can stay there tonight." Rachel stared at him, as if he'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. Her first instinct was refusal. It flashed in her eyes, fear, pride, shame, all tangled together. "We can't take your space," she said. "You've done enough. We'll figure something out." He leaned forward, slightly lowering his voice. "The apartment's empty. Has been for almost a year. I keep paying for it because—" His sentence stalled, emotion tightening his throat. "Because I wasn't ready to let it go." The truth hovered heavily. The apartment had belonged to him and Emily before life unraveled. "You'd be doing me a favor," he murmured, "giving the place purpose again." Rachel's breath hitched, torn between disbelief and desperation. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help us like this? You don't even know us." Adam held her gaze with a steadiness she hadn't seen from anyone in years. "Because someone should have helped me when I needed it. And no one did." The confession slipped out raw, unpolished, like a wound reopening. Evan looked up, then eyes wide, hopeful in a way that felt both beautiful and heartbreaking. "Mom," he whispered. "It's warm, right? Really warm." Adam nodded once. The boy turned to his mother, pleading silently. And that was the moment Rachel's resistance cracked. Not because she trusted easily, she didn't, but because she trusted her son's instinct more than her fear. Adam stood motioning toward the door. "Come on, my truck's outside." Rachel hesitated only a heartbeat before gathering Evan's backpack and rising slowly to her feet. As the three of them stepped into the storm, the rain swallowed them instantly, cold and merciless. Adam opened the passenger door, guiding them and gently shielding them from the wind. When he circled to the driver's seat, he caught a glimpse of Rachel watching him, with an expression he couldn't decipher, part suspicion, part gratitude, part something unspoken. As he turned the key and the engine rumbled to life, He felt a strange shift inside him, as if a line had been crossed, as if he had invited fate into the cab of his truck. The wipers beat fiercely against the storm as they drove into the darkness, hauling 3 lives toward a moment none of them yet understood. The apartment sat on the 2nd floor of an aging brick building, the hallway dim and smelling faintly of old wood and time. Adam unlocked the door with a key that had grown cold from months of disuse, and when it swung open, dust motes drifted lazily through the glow of the single overhead light. "It's small," he warned quietly, stepping aside so Rachel and Evan could enter, "but the heat works. Water, too." He didn't add the rest. He kept paying for everything, even groceries sometimes, as if the place still waited for a life that had vanished. Rachel stepped inside cautiously, one hand resting on Evan's shoulder. Her breath caught. The apartment wasn't perfect, faded paint, a couch with soft corners, a tiny kitchen, but it was clean, safe, warm. After weeks of fear, it looked like sanctuary. Evan walked ahead, his eyes expanding as he explored the living room, brushing his fingers along the back of the couch, staring wide-eyed at the framed photographs on the wall. He paused at one in particular, a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile dressed in hospital scrubs. "Who's she?" he asked. Adam froze. Rachel, who had drifted toward the photo, went absolutely still. Her hand lifted slowly to cover her mouth, her eyes filling so quickly it startled even her. "Adam," she whispered, barely audible, her name. What was her name? Adam swallowed hard. "Emily. Emily Carter." Silence swelled thick and electric, as though the air itself understood something monumental had just surfaced. Rachel's legs nearly gave out. "Oh my God," she murmured, gripping the back of the couch for balance. "I know her." Adam blinked, confused and wary. "You knew my wife?" Rachel nodded shakily, tears spilling down her cheeks. 11 years ago, my mother had a massive stroke while we were traveling. We didn't know the area. We were alone, terrified. A nurse stayed with me for hours, held my hand, explained everything the doctors couldn't get to in time. She never left my side, not even after her shift ended. Her voice broke. Her name was Emily Carter. Adam felt the room tilt beneath him. Emily had come home that night exhausted, telling him about a young woman who had just lost her mother, saying she couldn't bring herself to go home until she was sure the girl wasn't alone. He had listened, touched by her tenderness, never imagining that the girl Emily comforted would stand in his living room more than a decade later. Rachel took a small step toward him, her voice trembling with wonder and grief. "I tried to find her, you know. To thank her, but I never could. And now..." She covered her face, overwhelmed. Adam sank onto the edge of the couch, the breath knocked clean out of him. The coincidence, or whatever force drove this moment, was too precise, too strange, too painfully beautiful. Evan, sensing a shift he couldn't understand, climbed onto the couch beside Adam. "She helped my mom?" he asked softly. Adam nodded, staring at the photograph. "Yeah," he whispered. "She helped a lot of people." For a long moment, the room held all 3 of them in its quiet, broken harmony. Rachel wiped her eyes, feeling something inside her ease for the first time in years. Not relief, not safety exactly, but a sense that the universe had been guiding her even when she thought she was only running blindly. "This can't be an accident," she whispered. "Us ending up here. Tonight. In her home." Adam's voice was rough. Emily believed everything connects. She said people cross paths for reasons we don't see at first. He looked at Rachel, seeing not just a frightened mother, but the echo of his wife's compassion and the living proof that kindness traveled farther than he'd ever imagined. For the first time since Emily's death, the apartment no longer felt like a shrine or a wound. It felt as if something was shifting, opening, letting in a new breath of a life Emily herself might have welcomed. And as the snow began falling outside the window, soft and steady, Adam understood one thing with absolute certainty, whatever had brought Rachel and Evan to his table tonight. Emily had a hand in it. Over the following weeks, the apartment slowly shifted from a hollow echo of the past into something gently alive again. Adam noticed it first in the small sounds Evan's laughter drifting from the kitchen as he inspected the mismatched mugs, Rachel humming softly. While folding the blanket, she insisted on washing the faint thump of footsteps that no longer felt like ghosts. Life was moving back into a space Adam once believed would stay frozen forever. Rachel began her new job at the bakery Adam's friend owned, waking before dawn and returning home with the scent of warm bread clinging to her clothes. She worked with a quiet intensity, eager to prove herself, eager to rebuild. At the end of her first week, the bakery owner told Adam, almost in amazement, "She's the hardest worker I've hired in years." Adam felt something warm settle in his chest, pride that startled him with its depth. Evan enrolled at the nearby elementary school. On his first day, he clung shyly to Rachel's coat. But by afternoon, he bounced through the apartment door breathless with stories about a boy who traded him crayons and a teacher who said he drew like an artist. And when Mia visited that weekend, the two children bonded instantly. She taught him how to balance on a scooter. He taught her how to fold paper airplanes. Their laughter filled the apartment with a kind of brightness Adam had forgotten existed. Evenings developed a rhythm. After dinner, sometimes at Adam's house, sometimes at the apartment, the four of them would sit together, sharing stories about their days. Sometimes Evan fell asleep on the couch before the final sentence left his lips. Sometimes Rachel lingered a little too long in the doorway when Adam said goodnight. Each moment was small, ordinary, but threaded with a gentleness none of them dared name. Yet beneath the warmth, each carried their private battles. Rachel still woke from nightmares, clutching the sheets as though bracing for impact. Evan flinched at loud voices. Adam, though steadier than he had been in years, still paused at the photograph of Emily, searching for permission in a silence that was both comfort and ache. But something undeniable had anchored itself among them, a fragile, unspoken unity. They weren't a family, not yet. But they were moving toward one another, step by tentative step, as though some unseen force was teaching them all how to breathe again. And whenever Adam glanced around the once empty apartment, he felt it clearly the place was no longer haunted. It was healing. Word spread long before anyone understood the truth. Neighbors saw Adam carrying groceries up the stairs to the apartment and whispered about the widowed mechanic who had suddenly taken in a mysterious woman and her child. A cashier at the local market commented on how often Rachel bought discounted produce. Someone from the garage mentioned seeing her wait in Adam's truck during his lunch break. In a small Minnesota town, stories blew across the community faster than winter wind, reshaping themselves with each retelling. Soon the speculation hardened into judgment. Some claimed Rachel was taking advantage of Adam's loneliness. Others suggested Adam, still grieving, had lost his sense. The cruelest voices insisted Rachel was hiding something, using her hardships to trap a good man. Though none of the rumors reached Adam directly at first, they gathered around him like a cold mist, subtle but insistent. When they finally reached Rachel through a strained comment from a neighbor and an awkward silence at the bakery, she felt shame ignite in her chest. She tried to brush it off, but the weight settled into her shoulders like a burden she feared would crush the small, fragile life she was rebuilding. That night, after washing the dishes and tucking Evan into bed, she approached Adam with a quiet, brittle determination. He immediately sensed something was wrong. She stood near the kitchen table, twisting her fingers together in the way she did only when fighting fear. "Maybe we should stop having dinners together," she murmured. "I don't want people thinking I'm taking advantage." Her voice faltered on the final words, revealing the sting the rumors had inflicted. Adam stared at her, stunned by the suggestion, and then almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You care what people think." His tone wasn't mocking. It was incredulous. Rachel shook her head, eyes lowered. "No, but I care that they think poorly of you." Adam leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, as the truth spilled out of him with unexpected force. "My reputation before you showed up the lonely widower who eats alone every night. The man everyone pities but no one talks to. The mechanic who can fix anything except his own life." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You didn't harm my reputation. You brought it back to life." The raw honesty in his words pierced through her defenses. She looked up, startled, caught between emotion and disbelief. He continued softer now. "Let them talk. They don't know us." For a moment, the kitchen fell into quiet stillness, the kind that settles only when truth has been spoken aloud. Gradually, the narrative around town began to shift. The bakery owner praised Rachel's dedication to every customer who walked in. Evan's teacher mentioned how kind he was, how willing he seemed to help other children. A neighbor witnessed Adam kneeling to tie Evan's shoe on the sidewalk and told another, "He's a good man, that Carter." Even the customer who had once implied Rachel was manipulating Adam eventually returned to the garage, murmuring an apology he struggled to articulate. Not everyone changed their opinions, but enough did that the whispered cruelty lost its force. Acceptance grew tentative, but real. And with it came a new understanding. Whatever was forming between Adam, Rachel, and their children was not a scandal, but a quiet, necessary beginning. 1 year after the night Rachel and Evan stepped into the diner, the once abandoned storefront beside Adam's garage pulsed with warm yellow light and the comforting scent of rising dough. The sign above the door read, "Rachel's Hearth Bakery," followed by the simple promise, "Warm meals, warm hearts." What had begun as a fragile attempt at survival had grown into a flourishing business that drew people from every part of town. Locals came for the pastries, yes, but even more for the atmosphere. Rachel created a place where no one felt like a stranger, and no one ever had to eat alone. As December settled in with its soft Minnesota snow, the bakery transformed into a haven of twinkling lights, garlands, and cinnamon-spiced air. On the evening before Christmas Eve, Rachel and Adam hosted a free holiday dinner open to anyone who needed a warm meal or a warm moment. Volunteers from the community arrived early to help set up folding tables and string lights across the ceiling. Mia and Evan decorated sugar cookies shaped like stars, proudly arranging them on platters near the entrance. People began to file in slowly, families struggling to make ends meet, elderly neighbors who lived alone, veterans, young mothers, and a handful of curious townsfolk who wanted to witness what kindness looked like up close. When everyone was seated, Rachel stepped toward the front of the room. Her hand shook slightly, though her smile remained steady. Adam watched her from beside the dessert table, a quiet pride blooming in his chest. She took a breath before speaking, her voice warm and clear enough to soften even the hardest eyes in the room. 1 year ago, she began, I walked into a diner during a storm with nothing but fear in my chest and my son's hand in mine. We were hungry. We were lost. And a stranger pulled out a chair for us. Her eyes found Adam's, and her voice wavered just enough to reveal the emotion beneath. Tonight we want to pass that gift forward. The room erupted in applause, gentle but full of heart. Then Adam stepped beside her, resting one hand against the back of a chair as he addressed the crowd. My wife used to say kindness doesn't end with one person. It moves person to person, table to table, until it reaches someone who needs it most. He paused, eyes lingering on the photo of Emily that Mia had placed near the counter earlier that day. I thought that chair in the diner would stay empty forever. But life had other plans. Dinner unfolded with laughter, conversations drifting from table to table, and plates being refilled faster than volunteers could count. When the last guests trickled out into the snowy evening, the bakery remained bright and warm, quiet, except for the soft breathing of Mia and Evan, who had fallen asleep curled together on the couch. Rachel and Adam stood near the window, watching snowflakes drift past the glowing sign. Rachel rested her head lightly on his shoulder, the gesture instinctive, unforced. "Do you think she knows?" she whispered. No name was needed. Adam's answer came softly. "Yeah, I think she does." Outside, the night was silent. Inside, a new kind of family quietly took shape, not built from blood, but from choice, from resilience, from the simple act of pulling out a chair when someone needed it most. In the end, stories like this remind us of a truth. Experts in human behavior continually affirm connection is not built from grand gestures, but from simple acts of courage, opening a door, offering a meal, choosing compassion over judgment. Healing begins the moment someone feels seen, and entire futures can shift because one person refused to look away. If this journey moved, you consider liking and subscribing so more stories of resilience and quiet heroism can reach those who need them. And before you go, share your voice in the comments with a short phrase that captures what this story meant to you. Type, "Choose kindness,"